All right, good morning, everybody. I just want to start off and introduce myself. My name is Aaron Hagman. I am a lifelong entrepreneur, a coach, speaker, an advisor for a lot of different companies, different team members. I have worked my whole career leading people. Is really what it's about. Like, people ask me, they say, Aaron, what do you do? What kind of businesses do you run? And I've owned marketing companies. I've owned a human resources company that, supported onboarding workers at massive levels, down to sports teams. I owned a soccer team in the United States soccer system for quite a while. And at the end of the day, I realized my goal, my talent, what I focus on is really building businesses through people, right? At the end of the day, all businesses hit a certain scale, a certain size, where we have to realize that it's not about us. It's not even in a larger organization about our individual performance. It's about what we can start to get out of our team members on that side. So the goal here is to really talk about growth, right? And put this lens of growth on what, in the perspective on growth. Because I would challenge everybody, and Brandon just kicked it off here with your minute to think about the question, which is, what does growth, by definition, mean, right? Because we can think about this in a lot of different ways. There's growth of the company, there's growth of me individually, there's growth of my team, and pushing people along. And so that's really what we want to talk about, and I want to offer a few different perspectives on growth. Because to me, growth becomes a conversation around leadership, right? Growth isn't just doing your job well and, making sure that you covered all your P's and Q's. It's really about changing that shift from management into leadership, right? So I want to offer, and it'll segue into the activity when we're done here after me, really three topics that we're going to dig into today, three things that we're going to focus on. One is the idea of shifting our lens into servant leadership. So we'll talk about servant leadership, what that means, our version of that, our perspective. I like to speak from experience and share a lot of my stories, individually. We will talk about hiring. With growth, naturally comes hiring. And, conversations around how do we hire, how do we keep our culture together? How do we keep what is an amazing company with 40,000 global employees moving forward? And then lastly, I think really what's important, especially when we consider talking about leadership, talking about team building, is a conversation around what I call the professional development playbook. We always think about training, we think about this term professional development. What does that mean in actuality, and turning that into a game plan, a tactical plan? So that's the focus for us today. So servant leadership is an interesting perspective. It's an interesting thought, right? There's the idea that as leaders, as managers, as directors, as executives within our organizations, within our communities, that we're here to drive the people, right? We're here to get the results. And we often through our careers learn that approach. We learn to put the results on there, measure the goals, drive the people, and hold them accountable, right? But servant leadership is an important shift in the way we think about things. It's important to consider the shift that I am here. I used to use the phrase as a servant CEO, meaning my job is my people. So what does servant leadership look like? What can that turn into? Is the idea that we have to build leaders. We have to build leaders. And we all understand, and we've been on our own career journeys, that we start as high performers and the doers, and these are the supervisors on our teams and our amazing people that eventually make it to management. But what is management? Management is managing the work and managing the people. But that's not what I want to talk about today. It's the next level of progression from going from driving the people, cracking the whip, how are you doing this, what are your results, talk to me about your methodologies, into supporting the individuals, the people. I like to say, my approach is, as one of the slides already showed, is building businesses through people. But eventually, it's the person that matters on here. So servant leadership becomes about, well, how can I help you? Right? Imagine a scenario. Employee comes into work in the morning, and imagine it's you as the employee. At some point in your career, we've all been here, and you come in and you have a great boss, and that boss is supportive and they're there for you, their communication is great. They come in and they say, how's your work? How's the project going today, right? Can you give me a status update? What's the customer say? What's your team doing? How is it going? Okay, that's great. That is a supportive boss. That is somebody who's there. They're looking out for you. They're checking in. They're there. They're working with you. But I'd offer a different lens. If we shift that question from how is your work going to how are you today, right? We're here for the people. We're here to lift our team members up. And so when we say, how are you doing today? What's in your way? The answers might not be what you'd expect. It might not be about the project. It might be, oh, my kids are crazy last night, and I just didn't get a lot of sleep, and I'm feeling a little low today, right? The questions you learn to ask are for our team. What are your roadblocks? How can I help you? What's in your way? And you'll be amazed. Like, opening that question up in that context at times gives our team members the opportunity to say things they might not have otherwise said. Give me an update on the project. Well, here's what's going on, boss. Well, what's in your way? My budget's too small. It's a very different conversation that's going to get us directionally for the project or whatever the work is in question, where we need to go, if that makes sense. So the goal is to take our high performers, and when they move into management, they're managing people, they're managing the work, but we want to approach this idea. We're here as part of the leadership team for this global organization today to understand, well, how can I take my managers? How can I push them into a leadership role, right? And so it becomes creating the culture where we all have, 6, 7 direct reports, whatever the studies show that we should have, sometimes more, sometimes less. And, we can only get so much work done through the 7-person team if I have 6 reports. But if I can develop leaders and I can get them to then be developing others behind them, that becomes where we can achieve growth as an organization, right? Organizational growth will come from our personal growth, and this is a skill. This is the difference between, being a middle manager, senior director, those types of things, and moving into the executive ranks, because there is a point where the work is not about us. Our ego has to get checked at the door, and it's about our team. So what's our job description? What does that mean? If I'm here and I have a division to run and I have to manage the work, I would push you to think about your time allocation, right? I'm a numbers nerd, and I always like to break things down into percentages and ratios and get the best ROI out of things. And so I'm looking at, okay, well, now I'm in a leadership role as an executive and a leader into this team, and I want to build leaders, so where am I putting my time? And I'd argue a third. I would argue that if you take your 50-hour week, 50 hours a week we work, I don't know, maybe ASML is an 18-hour-a-week organization or not, I'm not sure. But either way, take a third of your hours that you're putting in each week and realize, I need to be dedicating that to building my team, to talking about the development playbook and building playbooks for individuals, which we'll talk about later. So again, I push you to challenge yourself, to look at, as an exercise, where do I spend my time? Am I spending my time coaching? Am I spending my time removing roadblocks from my team members? Because that's how we're going to organizationally move forward, right? And think of the circumstances. I love to look at scenarios in another lens, right? One of the reasons as an entrepreneur it's exciting to me to own different businesses is to look at these challenges and to say, man, I could do this at an engineering firm, I could do this at a human resources company, or I could do it in my sports team, right? Is the idea of where do I spend my time? Imagine if me, the owner of a sports team, is driving my coaches about results and this and this and this. I'm not a coach. I'm not a soccer professional. I was a soccer executive, right? The idea is, how can I help that person do their job better? What did they need? What is in their way? The most powerful question I learned to ask as an executive in my career is, what is your roadblock? How can I help you? Right? So if we're taking 30, 40% of our time and we're supporting our team, that starts to look a little bit different in how we spend our time and how we work day to day. So what does that mean? Again, I'm a numbers guy. I believe in that adage that if you want to manage it, you have to be able to measure it. We can only manage what we measure. Okay, cool. So let's put this perspective on KPIs, on our job as leaders. If our role is leadership and my role is to develop other leaders, how am I going to measure that success? So let me offer a couple of things that I've done over the years. For me, for my leadership team, the executives on here, when I would talk to them and say, how are you doing at your job? Again, it wasn't, oh, we achieved this project, we achieved this. Yes, we have global directives we're working toward together, but one of the measurements was, what do we call the goal? Your team success rate. Your team success rate. How did your team do on their goals this quarter? So, a team member would say, I'm going to have my team hit 75% of the goals. The 6 team members go, they set 5 goals each, they have 30 goals, being kind of a numbers dork right now, but if that team only hit 15 of their goals and they achieved a 50% capture rate against their goals, I'm going to talk to my leader. But what's my conversation going to be? Or if you're the leader, what's your conversation with yourself? What are my corrective action steps? It's not the work. It's how can I help my team hit their goals? And the idea of a holistic approach to supporting the human, the person on our team, becomes, well, again, you don't necessarily know the answer you're going to get on there. I need a vacation. I'm burnt out. I need more resources. I don't like my job. I'm in the wrong role. Whatever it is, what do you need? And you may, if you get the leadership lens in people's brains, and if you can adopt that lens, you might start to say, the answers that come for yourself and come from your team might be, well, I need motivational training. I need, psychological training to understand people's motivations and how to help these people on my team, right? We think about high performers in any world. It could be business, it could be sports, it could be anywhere, right? And it's never, at a certain point of the game, when you're competing at the highest levels of business or otherwise, it's never just about the work, right? It's never just about how did I do in my results, how did I do in the game yesterday. It becomes about the whole person, a holistic approach to servant leadership, right? Are you sleeping well? Are you eating well? What's your self-care look like? Becomes a very different conversation if I'm having that with my team. Where's your balance off? Are your kids driving you crazy? Is your spouse driving you crazy? Whatever, right? So it's this idea to really turn around and look at our role, not to serve our customers necessarily on the front lines. Don't get me wrong, we all have these responsibilities, not to do the work, but it's to build my team. I could go to work all day, and if you have this mentality, you go to work all day, you could never touch a spreadsheet, you could never touch a client email, and you could spend all your time coaching and developing your team and working with roadblocks and taking this mentality of the next time you join a team meeting around, that your team is running, your role isn't there to manage and to, hold people accountable. It becomes, I want to help. It's a shift. We could talk about the tactics, and I've given a few examples, but the important thing here is this is a mental shift, right? What's my job? I used to look at the org chart. Wherever I was in the org chart, my job was down that org chart. My job is to help my team become better leaders. Many measurements of success and organizational success is saying, wow, look at the leaders that I have generated, right? Think about sports. It's an easy one for me. I'm a sports guy. And you think, wow, you look at this coach in the NFL has begat 5 head coaches out here. This CEO over here, Steve Jobs is pretty famous for this, right? At Apple, would spin off other leaders. They're suddenly running JCPenney and this company and that company. And it's because they're building leaders. They're not building doers. They're not building just managers of work. All right? So this perspective, this shift for us, this is what gets me going. I'm a people person. I love people. I can't wait to have one-on-one conversations, engage with everybody here because, I always used to joke, I owned a human resources company for over 20 years. It was never my goal as a kid to be like, man, I want to own a human resources company. Woo! Right? I don't think that's anybody's goal in life. And if they are, they're a weird kid. But where you go with that, what got me going is getting up and seeing my team's success. Measuring another KPI success is looking within the organization and saying, how many people in my teams and the teams behind me have been promoted? They started here, they moved up there, even one level. That's amazing success. That is impact to people. And if we care about our job description is to make my team better, make their lives better, and subsequently let them succeed, be awesome and successful, and the company wins. This is really what it's about. And this is how we achieve organizational scale, right? I'm talking a lot about leadership today and the idea of this, but the theme is growth for us today. And if we want to talk about creating organizational capacity, which is my nerdy way to measure growth, that's what we're doing, right? I could lead 6 high performers, and we're a great team of 7. But if I can build 6 leaders, and they've got a team of 6, we're like an awesome team of 43. I think if I counted myself in that right. So somebody can call me out on my math later on that. All right, our perspective. Let's talk about the next piece of the puzzle, hiring. ASML's growth. So I'm super proud to be here today, to be working with you guys and to talking to this company, because I like semiconductors and microchips and all these cool things that we build. But I'm more impressed with the entrepreneurial story and the growth of this business. This is a company you guys should be super, super proud of. A global organization of just under 40,000 employees. 40,000 employees, right? And with a growth path of what? 2x, 3x, whatever the numbers are, I don't even care, right? If you get 1.5 times the growth on here, that's not going to translate directly, like, oh, we're twice as big, we need 40,000 more employees. But it's going to translate to somewhere in there, right? You double the size of the business, we double the work we can do, the capacity we have, we're probably going to add 10,000 more employees. 5, 8, I don't know, enough. That we need to think about, and I heard us talk about it today, even in the prompt this morning, right? Which is, okay, well, how can we bring new team members in but protect this amazing company and culture that we have, right? So we want to think about this. So I give a much longer speech on hiring, so I'm going to do my best to keep this one kind of short. But what I want to talk about here is values, right? I've already heard them today, and I love these values, beyond the fact they're all C's and easy to remember. Challenge, collaborate, and care. So my challenge to us today, I know actually this will, a hint for the room, as I think this segues into the next exercise pretty directly, which is how can we incorporate into our process, which we'll talk about here, into our hiring process, our values, right? Hiring to values. Values are this to me as a business. Values are the litmus test, if you will, the test of which we make our decisions, right? Should I add this person to the team? Should I invest into this project? I'm going to start kicking balloons here. Should I, fire this person from our team? If I have a challenging decision to make in my career, values for our business are the tool, right? Is this consistent with the values? Am I going to make a decision because I care about this employee? Am I challenging this employee's growth? Are we collaborative? So whatever the methodology is, and I can give you a few examples, we just want to make sure that we create touch points in our hiring process to check these things. It's not that hard, right? Here's an easiest way to do it. I'll give you a tip in the room, which is share the value. In fact, I like the little narratives that come off ASML's website and such behind these. Share that and say, what do you think? How does this relate? Can you connect? Show me how this connects to you in your life, right? It's very simple, right? If I want to find out if somebody likes sushi, I will say, what do you think of sushi, right? A weird analogy, but it works. So it's the same thing on here, is now to create questions. To create questions in our hiring process that I would argue every single employee at ASML needs to go through, right? If our values matter and holding this together, the magic together matters, then we need to find a way to say, to challenge, to see if people are collaborative in nature, right? To script questions that don't lead them to the right answer, but to ask. Right? It's the same thing. What does caring mean? What does caring turn into action? Show me examples. So this goes further, right? We bring it into the hiring process, but we want to make sure that we're continually using our values along the way. So come review time, come onboarding time, we want to be training to our values. We want to be talking about our values. We want to be sharing examples of our values, right? I'm a big fan, and we're going to talk about this in a second, of a 90-day checkpoint after somebody comes onto the team. Right? to have a conversation, even if it's not with you, their supervisor, maybe you have a mentor on the team for them, somebody else, and to have that person have a conversation about, talk to me about the values. Have you been living the values? Have you been seeing the values? Are we living up to the values of this business in the hiring process? We're talking about hiring right now, like putting that lens on. Not a lot of companies do this, right? Especially in the Great Resignation, the hiring challenges in 2023, 2025, where we're at. We often are like, are you qualified? Do you know how to do this? Do you have a pulse? Come join the team. And that's a mistake. That's a crapshoot at best. You go hire the next 50 people, and you're taking that, do you have a pulse approach on here? What's our success rate? 20%, 50% if you're lucky, 6 months in, a year later. And that is troublesome, right? Because now as the supervisors on the team, we've got to go back through. We've got to hire again. We've got to retrain again, and our resources are going to be tapped. So when we're talking about hiring, we want to be very, very thorough and really bring in the company lens on values first. So now let's talk about a little bit about process within hiring. So to me, I would take a guess that instinctually, a good percentage of this room is talented at hiring, right? You're just good at it. You know how to connect with people, you know how to ask questions, you know how to not let something go, ask the follow-up questions on here, and that's cool. And honestly, to speak for myself, I was pretty good at hiring. With my businesses, when we were small and I'd hire it, it was cool. I could do it myself, and we were always pretty good. I'd get that feedback, man, your organization is good at hiring people. Well, that's cool, but it's not about me. It's about growth. It's about a 40,000 employee company right here. So how can we be good? How can we be good at hiring? How can we mitigate talent in this conversation and give people process and systems and tools? If we've heard the adage in business, it's to hire slowly and fire quickly. I'm not going to talk about the latter part of that today because we're talking about hiring, but I adamantly believe and coach and train to a painstaking degree that we should really, really take our time in hiring slowly. And to me, it becomes a process, a 3-step process, right? 2 weeks in front. And if it's a job we've done before, it won't take this long to do it over and over, but prepare. What is the job description? So what are the traits? Before I meet a soul, right? What do I need? What are the traits of this person? Where do the values fit in of ASML? How can I, be prepared to have the right person on my team? And that means going through preparing your interview questions so that you don't just rely on your talents and ask whatever questions on your mind to that person, but to say, hey, for the first round interviews, we're going to ask this set of questions to every candidate. And to be able to have a litmus test, as I said, to score them against a basis, right? Ask the same question to 10 people, you're going to understand the challenging, dynamic of that person, if that's what you're trying to understand about. All right, so prepare. At the beginning of preparation on here, what I like to do, again, being a numbers guy, and also a people person here, which is, if this makes sense, is that we always want to create a scoring rubric, right? Here's the 20 categories, 10, 20 categories. You got 3 of them right there, 3 values, they're already on the board. Experience, tenure, location, whatever the factors are. And if you do this in the preparation stage, right, we have a test to take people through. I was a big fan of whittling down to the top 3. And all of the people involved in the hiring process on here would go through, for the final candidates that came through, we would get the 5, 6 people that touched them, from administrative staff to the people that interviewed, and go and say, okay, let's rank them now. No ties, right? Experience, top 3, number 1, 2, and 3. And when you have a process, when you have a test, you say, I need an amazing engineer on my team. Here's the skills, here's the traits, here's the personality quirks they need. They need to be hyper independent, whatever, right? It's about preparing this to the job. So if we prepare, you've never even met a person on here, I promise it's going to lead to your success on this. And it's already a painstakingly slow process, right? Because now when we get into active recruiting, a few things on here. I hear one about not enough candidates. It's just challenging. Competitive environment, tough to find the right skill sets, everything we need on here. And what I would say is that there's no one thing that works. If there's a message today, it's do not in the active recruiting phase, and when you're working with your teams, even if you're not the person posting the ads out there and your HR team is doing it for you, is to push them on their approach to not put their eggs in one basket. Right? One of my businesses, I used to recruit delivery drivers. It was pretty busy through the pandemic. I had Walmart as a client and this and that. And the idea on here was we needed bodies. We needed a lot of people. We would source 20,000 a week for candidates on here. And we did it all over the country, but to tell one story on here, I very, very much remember in Las Vegas, we used to run an ad in the Las Vegas Review-Journal, right? It's a newspaper, which is actually sort of, if you're already following where I'm going with this, the moral of this story. One day, it stopped working. We would run an ad on Sundays and Wednesdays, and it was like duck and cover, the phone's gonna ring. It just stopped working. Why? Because something named Craigslist came around. Like, I'm dating myself a little bit, but when that was invented on here, and then Monster.com and this and that, it just changed. I promise it's gonna change again in 5-10 years, right? Where people source, where the next generations, the younger Gen Zs coming into the workforce are finding their jobs and this and that, it's, gonna be different than what it is. So push your tactics. There should be 8-10 ways we're sourcing, because having a good quantity of candidates is imperative to sifting through to find quality. Because if we don't have enough, you're just going to start compromising and be like, well, I didn't get the 20 interviews we wanted. I met 7 pretty good candidates, and these 2 should work. I mean, just that language I hear me using there would talk about that. So active recruiting, have a process, and have multiple people touching the candidates. Well, maybe not touching from an HR standpoint, but points of contact. That's a terrible joke, sorry. Point of contact with the candidates, right? Who's doing the phone interviews? Who's doing the first interviews? Mix it up, right? If you're busy and you're the boss, meet the top 3 candidates, but have your team meet those candidates through. So an active process to have this go through. So to onboarding, the last phase of this process is a 3-step process. And to me, it's about 2 weeks of prep on the front. And because I use the analogy that we're fishing, you got to get them when they're biting. The active phase of recruiting is probably 2-3 weeks, right? Because people are looking at other jobs and want to be able to make those offers at the end. But we're not done, and this is where most companies mess up, right? We need to onboard people. We need to be brave enough to protect our culture, and growth is about the right people on the bus. Right? So we need to be brave enough to cut people at the end of 90 days. We made a bad hire. Didn't work out. Right? And to me, the onboarding process is 90 days long, 3 months. Right? And there's ways to do this really, really well. A couple of tactics. 1, create a training schedule for 13 weeks. Literally, we used to do a top 2. And be prepared for the job. This is in the prep phase, right? We had it ready to go. And we'd be like, here's the top 2 things we're going to work on each week. We're going to work on all kinds of stuff, but here's the top 2 things for the first 13 weeks of the job. And we're going to sit down at the end of 90 days and review that. Now, coming with that is the dashboard. I'm a measurements guy. You already figured that out. So you want to help somebody's success. You want servant leadership. This is my language from day one. Here's your dashboard. Here's how you win. Here's your scorecard. I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you. My job is to help you win. So I highly recommend putting those goals in play from day one. Probationary goals. Let them fail. Let them try. Right? If we want to create a culture of safety and trust, right? If we want to challenge growth, you need to fail. Right? 10,000 hours of mastery. How many times you fail along the way to mastery to things? So it's very, very important to go through this process, to set them up and to show them, here's the dashboards. My role is to help you. Talk to me about the roadblocks, and here you go. Right? To guide them along. Now, we'll talk about some other things on here, but creating touch points along the way, into the first week, into the first month, into the month 2. Also super, super very important, because the number 1 complaint for most employees coming into organizations that I've seen, I mean, it's always in the top 3, maybe not number 1, is I didn't get enough training. I could get a lot more training, and it would be what I needed on here. So we want to make sure that we're going through that process and that we're just showing them the roadmap. Here's how you win. My job is to help you win. It's not language we hear at most companies when we come on board. All right, I'm getting waved at from the back because I talk too much, so keep moving. The next thing on here is, and the third piece of the puzzle for us today, of driving growth through leadership is the idea of professional development. Professional development. Sort of a buzzword, I think, right, in business these days. What does that mean? To me, it's not a conversation about training, just to be clear. We're not talking about training and how to do your job. We're talking about professional development. All right, so what does that mean? And why do I call it a playbook? Because there's a way to do this. If we want to do anything at scale, and we want to be able to teach others to become leaders, we've got to give them the playbook. Here's my playbook, go take it. You join a team, here's how we run our plays. Get on board, right? This is how we do things at ASML. And so when we look at the playbook on here, again, it starts with this idea that we've talked about today, that our team members' success and growth, their success and growth is your responsibility. Just walk away from it. Own it today. If you take nothing else away from me today, just be like, oh, my team failed, I have failed. Like, that'll shift the way we work. It'll shift the way we interact. It'll shift the way we think. So when we talk about a playbook on here, we want to do a few things. I'm just going to give a few examples, but the goal for us today and to work and to push you guys to go collaborate is, what does your development playbook look like? What are your tools? Are you supporting learning, reading, professional development on here? And it becomes about, I think I got it on here. I'll get back to that in a second. So let's go to the first tactic on here, which is the idea of one-on-ones. A one-on-one. We've all heard it. We've all thought about it. But I want to offer some best practices around it. Because if we have adopted our servant mentality and we're here to drive this person, this is my job now. This is one of the most important meetings of the week. I did them with my direct reports once or twice a week. 30 minutes, right? So number one, cadence. Cadence matters. You do something, and you do something for your kids 2-3 times, and you don't do it again. What have you told your kids? It doesn't matter, right? So to say this is on our meeting agenda, this is on our calendars, working together now forever until we stop working together. Every Thursday, we're going to have coffee. Sit down in the morning, 8:30, come into my office. We're going to sit down one-on-one. We're going to go through things. So cadence is number one. You're showing you care. But here's where now I'm going to challenge the room. It's not your meeting. It's not your meeting. In fact, I would push you all to not have an agenda. The agenda is driven by the team member, right? And for me, in my one-on-ones, I want it to be about the person. Yes, we could talk about work. We could talk about something personal. You never really know. It's open questions. What's going on? How can I help you? Right? And in that one-on-one, don't drive your agendas, because you will. You have to beat that habit out of yourself after a while, but just don't drive your agendas on here. If a work thing comes up naturally in that conversation, oh, that's great. I'm glad we brought that up. We'll talk about that. Let's schedule a meeting. Let's follow up on that after lunch today. Table it. Take it out of that space. The space is for them. And if you make that clear, you make that very, very clear, you will see your team members' trust open up. What they need for development to open up on here, which is actually sort of the key in the segue to the next piece, the professional development plan, the PD plan. So the tactics of how we would help somebody's development, paying for classes, finding them mentors, finding them coaches, finding something you can help work with them on, things like that is, the tactics are important, but the plan's always customized. You want to know why I'd say 35% of your time should be going into developing and helping your team? It's this, right? You got 6-7 team members on your team. I'm thinking direct reports, right? You may have more, but at the end of the day, like, what matters to my plan, to this person's plan, so this person's plan is different, right? Like, I don't need personally, like, how to talk in front of a room training. But if your job dictates that, and I've had team members on it, they want to take a Toastmasters class. Done. I'll pay for it for you, right? Oh, I need to learn Spanish to help with this new regional job. Awesome. Well, we're paying for tutors and this and that. And notice what I'm saying. We're backing it up. Okay, what's your professional development plan? I'm going to help get you there. I'm going to make sure my budget for my job, for my team, of my team's development, is robust enough to do these things. Everybody's going to go back and ask for professional development budgets, and I'm going to get a phone call. But that's okay. That's okay, because this is what we're here for. And I will tell you this, actually, I won't get a phone call because ASML absolutely believes in this, right? ASML has tools and community and resources to help us with these things. All right, last thing on our professional development playbook. Last bullet point on the slide here today, which is the idea of reviews, okay? So I think an important thing I've been hinting at today is this idea of creating trust, right? Care. If I care about you, and you actually know I care about you, because it's one of our values, you're going to start to trust that I can fail, I can tell you, my life is crazy right here, I'm going to need some time off in a couple of weeks, things like that, right? And part of trust for me is not always reprimanding, right? It's not always accountability, how'd you do? It's where are we going? Like, I trust we've had our ups and downs, we've had good days and bad days in the last year, and when you kind of think of the review process, whatever our cadence is, I don't care. I don't even think we have cadence on here. You can meet quarterly, you can meet annually on here. It's about looking forward. If I care about your development, I want to say, hey, we've worked together for 2 years. What's on deck for year 3? What do you need? Let the employees drive this conversation. You may have ideas. You may have coaching. I think you can work on this. We're going to take some finance classes and get our numbers game together better, whatever it is. But it's about the individual employees and what they need in that scenario. So I push you to think, like, what are the, and I gave you a few examples of tools, right, in the tool belt here for professional development. But it's about putting this in play. And saying, what are we going to work on in the next quarter? What are we going to work on in the next year? These 2 or 3 things. And they're professional developments. They're skill sets. It's not, oh, I'm going to work on this goal because I missed it and I needed to do this. It's, no, what do you need to do to get better? Let's be honest, right? You need more discipline. You need more of that. I don't know. Whatever it is. Maybe turn into a conversation around health, right? I need to be more healthy so I have more energy. I mean, who really knows? It's about what are we working on? And here, if we're trying to develop and grow, this is often, well, what's the next step of your career? What's the next step of job? You're a manager. You want to be a leader on my team. What do we got to work on? Right? And it might be these types of conversations, learning these skill sets on how to lead and develop others so that the work becomes more than just about us as managers. So with that said, oh, I keep going the wrong way on this. My apologies. That's it. That's what we got for today. So I just wanted to say thank you, first of all. I'm very grateful. I love talking about people and leadership and all these things. So I'm very appreciative and grateful to be able to come up and speak about these things here today. And I'm going to be sticking around, too. So I think I put it up on the first slide. But you guys can connect with me on LinkedIn. Come talk to me here over the next little bit. And I'll pop around, I think, in some of the exercise work we do in the next section as well. But I'll turn the mic back over to Brandon and the team here in 1 second. He gave me a sign, so I'm going to sing and dance for the next 30 seconds. So what we're going to be doing next is challenge cards, and they're going to talk about this, but we're going to be putting these in play. So dig deep is my suggestion to this. They were taking the long way around is what it was. So dig deep into this and, apply the concepts today. Hopefully I've challenged you a little bit. Hopefully you've got 1 or 2 nuggets. That's always my goal. Talk about a lot and find that connection where you're like, yes, there's 1 or 2 pieces of magic in there that I could really build with and improve on. So hopefully this is something to challenge you, get your brains going, and be beneficial in the next session here. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks, boss. For you.